Hi everyone, today we are going to do a grid drawing of our mascot Clippy. And for this you will need one 6 by 9 inch piece of white drawing paper, a pencil and eraser, and your ruler. You will also need to pull up the picture of Clippy on your computer screen once you get to the point where you're going to start drawing him. And that picture is attached to the assignment. It's called Clippy BW for black and white, grid 3 by 4. All right, so that's attached right to the assignment. Just have that pulled up on your screen as you draw. The first thing we're going to do though is grid our paper. And the reason for creating a grid drawing is it allows us to take a smaller object and enlarge it correctly onto a larger area. So in this case, we are taking a small picture of Clippy, which is 3 inches by 4 inches, and we are going to enlarge it to 6 inches by 8 inches, because what we're going to end up doing is using a 1-inch strip across the top to create a value scale. A value scale is really important when you're drawing because it allows you to match your values to the value scale to make sure you're showing a wide range of values. Any drawing is better when it has a wide range of values. So the first thing we're going to do is take our paper and across the short side, that's the 6-inch side, we are going to put a 1-inch rectangle. So the way I like to do that is my 0 does not start on the end on my ruler. It starts right here and I make a mark at 1. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. It is very important when you do a grid drawing. Let me zoom in so you guys can see that. It's very important when you do a grid drawing to measure correctly. And that's because if not, it's going to look distorted and you don't want that at all. So what I would do again is I'm going to double check my 0 on my ruler is right there. My 0 does not start at the end of the ruler. Let me hold it here for you. My 0 is here. So I'm going to put my 0 at the top of the paper and make sure my first mark is at 1. And I'm a tiny bit off, so I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to come over here and make sure it's at 1 as well. And I'm going to attach those with a light line. The reason we're going to use very light lines on our grid is because the grid underneath your drawing, once you start shading, will be erased. So keep that in mind that right now I want you to use really super light pencil lines. All right, what we're going to do across here before we even do our grid in this large section is create a series of 1-inch squares for our value scale. So I'm going to line again my 0 up at the end of my paper, and I'm going to make a mark right on our line at 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Remember, at any time you can pause this, you can rewind this if something's not clear. And again, I just put my ruler across. It's about 6 inches across, a little less. These were hand cut, so it might be a tiny bit off. If it's a tiny bit off, no worries. This is just our value scale. I made a mark at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. I'm going to do the same thing across the top. The value scale doesn't necessarily have to be exactly measured because, again, what I was saying about the value scale is it's more to help you match your values to the original. Now, each of these marks I'm going to connect, and that's going to make a 1 by 1 inch square or close to a 1 by 1 inch square. These lines can be a little bit darker, and that's because this is going to be our value scale. So we don't need to erase these lines in the end. The rest of the lines we draw, we are certainly going to be making sure they are super light. All right, the value scale when done is going to look like this. But the first thing we're going to do is go ahead and finish up our grid. All right, so if we are enlarging, let me zoom out here. If we're enlarging an image that is 3 inches by, what did I say? 3 inches by 4 inches, we are going to enlarge it to 6 inches by 8 inches. So we can double check to make sure this is correct. 8 inches, 6 inches, we are good to go. And that's because this paper was 6 by 9. We took away 1 inch for the value scale. The next thing we're going to do is measure 2-inch squares. If you pull up the picture of Clippy, you will see that he has a series of 1-inch squares over him. We are enlarging this to twice its size, so we are creating a series of 2-inch squares. So I want 2-inch boxes across, 2-inch boxes down. So I'm going to start from the top here, and my 2 inches should line up, as you can see, with the 2 inches goes to there. So I'm making a mark at 2, I'm making a mark at 4, and my last mark is the edge of the paper. Okay, those marks lined right up with my inch boxes. So every 2 boxes I have a little mark, and I'm going to do the same thing down here at the bottom of my paper. I'm going to line my paper up with 0. I'm going to make a mark at 2, and I'm going to make a mark at 4. I'm also going to, I drew those darker so you can see them, but I'm going to lighten mine up a little bit because I'm now going to connect those lines with very, very, very light pencil lines. So if you're heavy-handed, this is where you want to be really careful. Bring this down so you can see it. I'm going to connect my 2-inch line with my 2-inch line and create a very light line. Now that's how light I want yours to be. I'm making mine a little darker simply because I'm doing a video and I want you guys to be able to see it. So leave yours light. There we go. And then I'm going to connect that line to that line, and we should have 3 rectangles across. They should be 2 inches wide each. Okay, super light. Yours can even be lighter than mine. I'm actually going to turn my paper this way now because I think I can zoom in a little bit more. That would be more helpful for you guys. And now that we have our lines going one way, we also need to draw them going the opposite way. So I'm now going to put my 0 on this line here, my 1-inch line, and I'm also going to make a mark at 2, 4, and 6, because remember we're doing 2-inch squares, and I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom here. I'm going to put my 0 on my 1-inch line that I used for my value scale, and I'm going to make a mark at 2, 4, and 6. And then I'm going to attach those with very light pencil lines. At this point, what you should have are a series of boxes that are 2 inches by 2 inches. They should be drawn using super light pencil lines. And then you should have a strip of 1 inch, a 1-inch strip that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 1-inch by 1-inch squares. And then I have a series of 12 2-inch by 2-inch squares. Go ahead and pause this video if you need to so that you can complete your grid. The next step is now to shade in your value scale. It doesn't matter to me if it goes from light to dark or dark to light. And it doesn't matter to me if you choose to blend them with your smudge stick. So again, the next step is to have 6 different values. The lightest one being white, you can leave that box white. The darkest one, the darkest gray or black that you can make with your graphite pencil. And then 4 values of gray in between, a really, really light gray, a few medium grays, a darker gray, and then of course your darkest. So you may also go ahead and pause this video now so that you can complete your value scale for your grid drawing. All right, guys, the next step, if you haven't already, is to pull up this picture of Clippy on your computer screen. Or when this video is over, you can pull it up so that you can see it at the same time. And our job is going to be to take each square, and you can see Clippy also has a series of 12 squares over him, and our paper has a series of 12 squares. and we are going to draw what we see inside of each square. I will tell you right now, as we take a look at Clippy, I do not expect you to draw these cinder blocks or the brick grid behind Clippy. We can just make that background a nice light or medium gray. So do not worry about the lines of the brick or the cinder blocks in the background. I am more concerned with the values that are in Clippy, and we can just do the background a medium gray. All right, let's get back. I'm going to leave that up on my screen. I'm going to take you back to my paper here. And I'm going to take a look at Clippy, and with very light pencil lines, I'm going to draw what I see one box at a time. Now, the reason I have my value scale at the top and not at the bottom is because if it was at the bottom, I'm going to be moving my hand around often, and I'm going to end up getting graphite on my wrist and then potentially messing up my drawing. I also like to start from the top and work my way down so my hand does not rub or get dragged across my drawing as well. So up here in the first box, I'm going to take a look at Clippy. What I like to imagine is the box also, don't do this to yours, but I like to imagine the box then cut into fours. If you're looking at Clippy on your screen also, his hat starts a little bit past halfway here and goes up to a little bit around halfway. Now I do that in an imaginary way. If it helps you to draw some more grid lines, you can. I just kind of imagine in my head the center or the side of each box. Now I'm drawing really light. It's important to draw super light in case you make mistakes. It's also important to draw light in case you have to erase and fix one of your cubes. Now, I'm lucky this first box only has a portion of his hat. Before we start shading, we are going to do the whole entire contour line drawing of Clippy as we see him. So all I'm doing is continuing to look up here at what's going on. So his hat is here. I actually think I brought that up too high. So the good reason for drawing nice and light is because you can make easy adjustments and changes. I'm going to zoom in. Oh, I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see a little bit more. Here we go. His hat comes here. It's got a little dip here and it comes down. Now in this hat, we also have a skull and crossbones. So I'm going to draw nice and light and just draw what I see. Don't draw what you think you know. Draw what you see. So I see this little guy. I see a crossbone here. And as you're working, just keep in mind that your goal is just to draw one square at a time. It does get quite overwhelming if you've never done this before to look at the entire picture. If I break it down into each section, it's much easier to imagine and it's much easier to break it down and see it one piece at a time. Have you ever heard the term, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So how do you do a grid drawing? One square at a time. Makes it a lot easier mentally if you're breaking it down into simple shapes. So this one goes here. That's the only thing in that one. That was the only things in that one. It's going to get a little more difficult as you move on to the harder areas like his face. But again, if you just take it one little square at a time, should not be a problem. All right, so I'm going to work on getting the contour line drawing done of Clippy. You do the same. You can pause this at any time, and then I'll show you how to start shading. Okay, so now that we are done with our contour line drawing of Clippy, before we start shading, we're going to do a few things. First, go ahead and look back and forth at each box, your 2x2 square on your drawing, to make sure that you've got everything in the right place. Look back and forth from your contour line drawing to the picture on your screen. I've included light sketchy lines of all of the contour line drawings, and the only things I haven't included are lots of texture. So for instance, in the picture, there's a lot of texture in his eyebrows, in his hair, and in his beard. I'm going to add that in later when I'm using the graphite pencil to add value. The next step is to go ahead and erase your pencil lines, as far as erase your pencil lines from the grid. And that's because you don't want those showing through the next step, which is to shade. So I'm just going to erase this little section here because I'll start shading right there. Let me let the camera go ahead and readjust itself. And so the rest of your drawing, once you go ahead and erase all of your grid lines, which you can go ahead and pause this video and do that as well, you should be left with a contour line drawing of Clippy. Now the final step is to add value, and I know you all know how to shade because we did our pencil drawing of our pencil portraits. So we're going to do the exact same thing here. So where I am looking in the picture that's on my screen here, I see a medium gray, and then I see a darker gray in the hat. Now we can imagine that Clippy's hat is black, but in the picture it actually just looks like a dark gray because it gets darker underneath his hat here. And the darkest part of this picture, if you take a look at it, are his eyebrows and his beard and some of the shading in the folds. For this, you're going to need your pencil, of course, an eraser, and possibly your smudge stick if you are one of those people that enjoy shading with the smudge stick. And again, all you're going to do is match the values. So for instance, where I like to start at the top again and work my way down, and that's because I don't like to take my hand and rub it all over my drawing. I'm going to start from the top and look at that gray. That gray in the picture looks like this gray on my value scale. So my job up here in this first box, I'm going to hold the broad side of my pencil for broadside shading. And I'm going to go ahead and take a look, and I'm going to start shading in the background. Remember, I did say that we did not need to include the brick texture of our background, and I'm doing my best to match the value. So I'm going to look back and forth. It actually is a little darker up top and it fades. So I'm going to continue that as well. So I would work on that. I would use my smudge stick as needed. Always important to shade in the same direction, especially when it's something like a flat wall. And you want to make sure, again, that you've erased your grid lines. Now, this technique is probably something that you guys will use at some other point in your life. Let's say Art 2 is the last art class you take. You might, at some point, need to enlarge something or redraw something bigger. The gridding technique is a great way to do that. Again, all you need to do is measure out your space and the picture that you're using, and make sure that you can grid them using equal amounts of squares. For instance, you can't grid a square on a rectangle. You'll have some empty negative space. All right, so there's my background. I'm going to go actually a little bit darker on that. It looks darker on my picture. It's kind of light on the screen. And I want to show you the difference between the hats. So now if I was working on the hat here, the hat as I see it in the picture is one of these grays, probably this one here. And my job is to fill in Clippy's hat with that medium gray. And now I'm looking on the screen and I think my background gray needs to be a little bit darker because I think I've got the hat value correct. But I do think I need to go back here. And I'm, again, looking back and forth from the picture to the drawing is very helpful. This picture, actually, the background, if you take a look at it, the background is a little bit darker at the top and it fades as we work our way down. So I do need to make it a little darker up here near the top and work my way down. I would continue to do that. If you are one of those that likes to use the smudge stick, remember smudge from light to dark. And that's because the graphite will collect on the smudge stick. And if you go from dark to light, for instance, if I started with this area first, and then I went to smudge something else, you can see the graphite that's on here. Now you can use the same technique we did with the pencil portraits. This might help you do your very light values. So I have very light values here in the nose. So this might definitely help me to use some of the graphite on the back of the smudge stick. Clippy is obviously not a human, but he does have, let me zoom in a little for you. He does have facial features that we can shade similar to how we learned when we did the pencil portrait of the human face. So again, the next step is to erase all of your grid lines. I like to start from the top and work my way down, and we are matching the values, which is why we have a value scale here. Normally, I would tell you to take the photograph and hold it up to the value scale. If you need to take this value scale and hold it up to your computer screen, that might help you match the values better. Regardless, take your time, match your values correctly, clean up your lines, and then by the very end, you should have a fantastic drawing of Clippy, our mascot.